Happy Wine Wednesday, everyone. Where's my seahorse? There he is. Everybody say cheers. At least Sophie joined. There's
I
Holly.
forgot to get my water.
Hope you're having a great week, everyone. Yeah, get your water, get your water. What I was going to say is apologies for being late. We're doing some new things. We were talking ahead of time. We're talking about getting some more focused Wine Wednesdays where we have an actual topic that we're talking about. I'm also, helping Sophie figure out how to start and stop these things and work these things for times I can't be here. But Holly did remind me that this week we're going to talk about setting up a juvenile tank. And to me, what a juvenile tank means is you have had fry, you've been successful with the fry, they're becoming bigger fry, you wean them onto frozen foods at 4 to 6 weeks, and then all of a sudden they're huge adolescent seahorses, and you've got tons of them. And even if you're selling them to people or to stores, now you're in the situation where they cannot stay in this little container that you kept the fry in, because now they're big seahorses starting to try to make their own fry and trying to make, themselves really big. So Holly's going to share with that because, of course, Kelly forgot. I admit it. I'm sorry. I've been really, really, really busy. You guys hear that every week, but it's getting ready to settle down. That is one announcement. And Sophie and I are going to work together to get Wine Wednesday more organized. So I'm really excited for that too. But Holly, do you want to really quick take over and tell me what we're supposed to be talking about and talk about?
Yeah, so we had talked about setting up Seahorse tanks, and the equipment you use, and people had been wanting to see it, for weeks and talk about that. So in my Facebook memories the other day, it just happened that a couple videos showed up that I actually made for Wine Wednesday. And they were way back. They're years old. They're back when I was setting up what I call my grow out tank. And that's where, like Kelly was saying, where the juvenile seahorses come to live when they're too big, for the little fry tanks or your fry tubs. They're eating frozen food and now they just need a place to live, until you rehome them or move them to your own display tanks. They're just a place to put the young seahorses while they're growing up, basically. So anyway, I have these videos to share of how I did mine. And keep in mind that we'll use this tank. It's fine for adults too. But I set it up originally for the juvenile seahorses, and a lot of self, the plumbing, as far as that's concerned. My husband did it. Normal that you find at your local hardware store. So some of it, you'll see like the tank and equipment are actually like your skimmer, and that kind of thing. But the plumbing itself is do it yourself. So you can buy tanks already plumbed. You can, get the stuff already made. You don't have to do quite what we did, but just keep that in mind, when you're watching, and I'll explain it in the video.
Okay, go for it. And I do want to say before she starts, I put it in the chat. I really would like to discuss what's going on with Shyla seahorses once we're done talking about juvenile tanks. If that's okay with Shyla, give me a yay or nay, Shyla, in the comments. I won't discuss it if you don't want me to, but I could discuss it in a way of my experience with that, because there was something I wanted to say in the messenger, but I never got around to doing so. So I definitely, okay, good. And then also I just wanted to say, as we're talking about Holly setting up this juvenile tank, we will eventually talk about setting up brand new in a separate episode. But Okay, go for it, Holly. Share away.
All right, and hopefully this works. I sent the video to myself in Messenger because
That's how I
I
do it.
couldn't
Yep.
share it. So anyway, let me see if I can get there and let's go.
There we are. All right,
See if
go
it
for
makes
it.
it big. Let's see if this is the first. Hi guys, my name is Holly. I raise Erectus seahorses. And Kelly asked me to make a little video showing you guys my do-it-yourself grow-out tank that my husband and I put together. So I'm going to share that with you today. The purpose of the tank is for the seahorse fry once they get a little bigger and they have been trained to eat frozen mysis. They can move into this tank and get big until I'm able to rehome them. So I'm going to start out by showing you my electrical equipment I use. I've got an adjustable DC pump from Jabeo, so I can control that pump speed to get the flow right in my tank. I also have a skimmer designed for a 240 gallon Simplicity 240 DC skimmer that I love. I use this on my display tank as well. So that's the main equipment that I have running this tank. So next we'll take a look at my sump. So we'll start on this end. So the water comes down from my overflow box into a filter sock, which you can't see from here, it's behind the skimmer. And then my protein skimmer sits in that chamber. In the next skimmer, I have that chock full of bio balls and also a bunch of filter sponges, so those stay cycled and they're ready to put into fry tanks whenever I have fry. After that, it flows through a sponge and into the chamber with the pump. I have a bag of charcoal media in there currently as well. The sump, by the way, I figured out it holds 15 gallons of water. Although it's sold as a sump 30, when you fill it with water, it doesn't hold 30 gallons, it holds 15, just so you know. Okay, on to the tank. All right. So, when the water's pumped back into the tank, it goes through a flow-through heater. I don't have a heater in the tank, so the water's actually heated outside the tank, and I keep it set to roughly 70 degrees. My husband did the plumbing to this himself. We didn't have any plastic hose clamps in our area. Those I had to order off Amazon. So currently we have just stainless steel for a couple weeks until the plastic clamps arrive. I think they're arriving this week sometime. You see coming off the top, that's a siphon break. You can see water flows out of it into the tank, but when the pump is turned off, it sucks in air so that water won't get pumped all over my floor. So, gotta make sure you have that. That's important. And here's the tank itself. This is a 69 gallon tank figured out. It came from Scripps Public Aquarium in San Diego originally. I bought it used for a couple $100. And it is sitting, see if I can get where you can see this. My husband found an old office desk at a place that we have here called Habitat for Humanity that recycles old housing materials and things. So he cut the legs off this old desk, sprayed it with a rubberized waterproof paint to protect it, and that's what my tank sits on. And I can keep stuff under it, as you can see, and I have drawers for all my aquarium equipment and things in there. One more thing I want to show you on this tank. It's very interesting. It has a built-in very large overflow box that's actually attached outside, but it's secured. You can't take it off. And has a big drain, so that's going straight down into my filter sock. But it also came with, it has this very strange large slot that any fish could pretty much fit through. So what we use to cover it up is a mesh screen for dog doors. And we got that at an actual screen booth and window booth at our local Ace Hardware store. So it's got a little bit bigger holes, and it's a lot stronger than your regular window screen, and it works great for keeping the seahorses and things from getting out. And I just have to remember and scrub with a toothbrush every day, because it can get full of algae and crap basically that you don't want, and it clogs it, and then you don't have good flow. So that's what that is. Now, the table that the sump is on, it's actually a console table bought from Walmart's website. And my husband put together, kind of customized it for me, but it makes a nice nice place for me to put my supplies. You'll see on top, this is plastic placemats from the Dollar Tree. And that is also underneath my sump. I have a used yoga mat that I purchased at a thrift store. And then I lay that plastic matting down on top of that as waterproofing between the sump and the little shelf that it's on. Another cool thing, down at the end of my tank, I have a bookshelf where I actually keep all my aquarium books and my journals for the seahorses. I keep track of everything related to them in journals and binders. So that's pretty cool too. And then on the wall here, I've got a nice little seahorse rack that I can hang my siphon hoses, nets, towels, anything I need on that. Looks like I need to clean that siphon hose. I've got some brushes for that, but just need to clean that. Lighting. These are just shop lights from Home Depot. One of them has a black light in it right now. That comes on at night. And then the other light, I can either have it on like during winter. It's on right now. You can see that I have a timer station set up over here. So the daylight's on 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. unless I unplug it. I do have skylights, so when the weather's nicer, there'll be plenty of daylight. I won't need to run the light. And then when that goes off, the nighttime light turns on. Let's see if we could see any seahorses right now. I think we'd probably catch some hanging out on the return. They love it there. Yep, there's one hanging out right now. I love it when they hang out on the return. They turn this pretty black and silver color. They look so pretty. And then the ones that like to hang out over by the food dish over here with the yellow chains. You can see a nice pretty yellow one right here. And here's another one hanging out in the rainbow currently. So anyway, decorations in here are all plastic and resin, like aquarium decorations, everything fake, no sand, no rocks. That's for easy cleaning and sanitation. So there's my Erectus grow out tank. Hope you guys enjoyed. Thank you.
Let me unmute myself. Oh, we're
Almost
watching the next
forgot
one. I'll
to
shut up.
share. The tank does have a lid as well. This is just an acrylic sheet from Home Depot that was pretty much cut to fit. So there's that also. My husband did a little slot you can see around here to go over the return. But I keep that lid on most of the time to prevent, evaporation. Another thing I forgot to show you is on the sides, the tank is insulated. That's like a bubble wrap with aluminum foil, kind of. They sell this at Home Depot. It's for insulating your house, but it works great on the tank also to help keep the temperature stable. Where I live, we have cold winters and hot summers, so that definitely helps. And on the other side of that, in between that and the actual acrylic, I use a light blue wrapping paper actually as background to help bring out the color in the seahorses. So just wanted to share that too.
Is that
That
it?
is it.
Okay, so first off, I want to say, Holly, I apologize because that was a really great video showing your setup, and you did send it to me, and I never made a video out of it. I'm so sorry because
Okay.
that's really valuable. You really walked through exactly what was going on. That's what people want, and we were Holly, or I'm sorry, Ray, Sophie, and I were asking questions as we went, just because, I think that's questions that other people might ask. So, but I want to say, amazing job sharing. I've never done, there were some sideways moments and whatever, but I've never done
Yeah,
such a
because
good
I'm
job of
using my
sharing.
phone. It was a
Right.
pain. And also,
But
I didn't end up using the lid either.
okay,
Yeah.
go to the lid first. So me and Sophie both asked that. Why would you use a lid, and why
Because where
wouldn't you?
I live in the woods, we have a ton of bugs. Like, and was in the summertime,
Okay.
So when the house is open at night, as you know, because you stayed here,
Yes.
bugs can get in, and I've had swarms of bugs, and I was always pulling bugs out of the tank. So what they're attracted by the light in here, but
Yep.
I figured out if I don't run the black light at night, the bugs don't come in really. So
Yes.
that solved that problem. And then
Well,
used
so
it.
so why do go
So I
ahead.
used the lid like starting out when I first set up the tank. I used that to keep stuff, like I said, from falling in the tank. Because another thing about that tank, I don't have that tank anymore, but it was a public aquarium tank and it was super wide and shallow.
Mm,
So, yeah, it attracted all kinds of stuff falling in it. But it ended up splitting a seam, 70
yeah,
gallons of water all over my floor. And then I
right.
got the glass tank, which I have
Let,
now.
let, let, let's back up a little bit. And Ray, maybe you want to answer this one. Why do people not typically put a lid on a seahorse tank?
For just the reason I posted there. When you lid the tank, you're not allowing enough fresh air to cross over the water surface to get proper gas exchange.
Mhm.
So when you say that, though, that's the right answer. But
But
for
gas exchange is critical for pH.
Okay, so one of the things, and I'm just asking, like I'm trying to pretend like I'm someone that knows nothing and I'm just asking you a question, right? So
Yeah.
I remember when I set up my reef tank, they had me run my skimmer's airline outside of my house to get that proper gas exchange for pH. So why does a
Yeah.
lid affect it if you can do it with the skimmer?
Well, in my opinion, a skimmer, you can't do it much with a skimmer by turning that or by putting that source outside. You have a bigger surface area at the top of the tank. Now, with a skimmer, people think that it's giving a good gas exchange. In fact, if you have it dialed in correctly, it will not. And the reason for that is the skimmer, the bubbles originate at the bottom, and as they're coming up, they're hitting the dissolved organics and other organic matter, and it coats these bubbles. And they become very coated very fast. The rest of the way, they're already coated. They cannot interact with the water for a gas exchange.
So go ahead.
It will do a little bit, but it will not do as much as having a turbulent water surface.
So that's what I was going to say is someone, because I'm basic, guys. Like I can't talk to you about the scientific stuff. What made this most sense to me is I think Dan told me when you have surface agitation, it's pulling oxygen into the water. Bottom line.
Yep.
So if you lid that, then the air that would be coming in because of the surface agitation is not
But you
happening.
get some air in because you're always going to have gaps, but it's
Right.
just going to be insufficient.
Right. And that's another reason why we always recommend, like, for instance, my return, I ended up getting lock line. And I need to do videos like Holly did to show you guys what I'm talking about because I can say it, but seeing it is better, I know. But I got lock line to where my return on my 65 gallon, it, comes through and goes in two different directions.
That's
One
what
is
mine
aimed
does.
for
Yeah.
handling the flow of the tank or returning water to the tank, and the other one is specifically for oxygen exchange. It makes the water constantly boop 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 boop, boop. So good points.
On the skimmer issue,
Yes.
a couple decades ago on Reef Central, there was a discussion there. Randy Holmes Farley had the Reef Chemistry Forum on there.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a discussion on a thread there where a poster, and I can't remember whether it was male or female, but was saying that they're getting a great gas exchange by just through the skimmer. And if you turn the skimmer off, you can see a big difference in the results. So Randy told him, well, then your skimmer is not doing a proper job.
Huh.
Then once it was explained to this, somebody else explained to the guy how to tune in his proper skimmer. And it was about a month later, he posted back that now he sees the point.
Yeah. Gotcha.
Obviously, once he got it dialed in, it would no longer do what he was wanting it to do.
So wait, and I know, like I said, guys, I'm basic. So what does that mean? Like, you can tell me that, I can believe it, I can take it and make it happen. But I mean, why? Why is tuning in the skimmer going to stop oxygen?
Well, the better the skimmer is dialed in, the faster it's going to get coated. Those bubbles are going to get coated.
Okay.
And if a bubble's coated, it can't exchange anything. It's how do I say? It's like taking two pieces of bread together. Okay, if you put the two pieces of bread are good together, but you put a piece of bologna in between, you can no longer have that contact.
Gotcha. So basically, if the skimmer is working properly, it's doing its job of removing organics, and it's not providing oxygen exchange.
Yeah.
I got you.
It precipitates the organics out of the water column, and it precipitates onto the surface of the bubbles.
Sometimes I need the baloney explanation, Ray. I appreciate you. See, you're so needed for sure. And another question I think that we said, or I said, I know I said, is about your screen. So you inherited or bought or got this tank that had the wide opening. I remember us dealing with it. I remember, hi, Chris
Yeah.
Gary. I remember helping us figure that out. And you used the window screening, but you also mentioned that you had to use a toothbrush every day
Because stuff
to
will get
scrape that.
stuck on it. Mm-hmm.
So how does that matter in the big scheme of things, thinking that that gunk is not making it to the sock?
Probably gets washed over the overflow to
Yeah,
the
it
sock.
did go through to the sock. It would just get trapped, just like anything else you put in the tank that stuff gets on that you have to clean now and then. And it really was not as big a problem as I thought it would be. It didn't really gunk
Okay.
up it near as much as I expected. I only had to toothbrush it off once in a while when I thought about it. It didn't change the water flow.
So
Really.
it never caused buildup that
It
you
didn't
know, worried
cause
about
any
overflow.
problems at all, really.
Okay. And I was just aiming towards thinking about the fact that if the gunk stayed in the tank
Mm-hmm.
and you weren't toothbrushing
Mm-hmm.
it, it's never making it to the sock. It's never making it to the skimmer, right?
Yeah, it'd be just like anything else in your tank that you don't clean. Yeah.
Got it. Right. Just making that point. What other questions did we ask, guys? I think you had some, Sophie. Okay, your first question, Sophie, ask it.
I asked how many growing seahorses you could put in the tank at a time.
Well, it depends. I mean, I never had it maxed out. It was so big that, I had about 20 in it. Was how many
How big?
survived I had 20 juveniles in that tank before I was selling them.
And how big
How
was
big was
the
the
tank?
But you can
It was 55 gallon.
yeah, was
60?
yeah, it's a 69-gallon tank with a 15-gallon sump it was.
Okay.
And I had about 20 seahorses in it, juveniles.
And how many? Like, how
And
did
they were
you?
living in a 29-gallon previously.
Right.
So with a
Improvement.
lot of
Right. I
water
get it.
changes.
Once you become successful with Fry, then you're like,
Yeah,
oh my
where do I
God, what do
put
I do
them?
with Sophie? But in a 65, like, how do you determine? I remember asking Dan this repeatedly, and there's no real answer.
There is
But for
it. Yeah,
you,
you just have to keep
how do
up.
you determine? Okay, did you just watch the tank and see? Okay, I'm starting to see algae build. I'm probably not doing enough water changes, or
I
a seahorse.
I tested the water often to make sure I wasn't getting ammonia, just to make
Mm.
sure things were okay. I tested that tank often. Like I never test my tanks now because they've been set up so long. But while the juveniles were in there, I want to say I was testing pretty much every day, just to
Yep.
make sure things were right. And plus, new tank and not following. I mean, when you have juveniles, you're not really following the rule of 2 seahorses for 30 gallons.
Right.
Yeah, that's pretty
Right.
much impossible. You'd have, thousands of gallons of water everywhere to do
Right.
that, depending on
Raise
how many juveniles you have. So what you have to do is just run as much filtration as you can, do water changes as much as you need to, and keep testing, making sure things are right, that you're not getting ammonia and such. And
Let's
it
let Ray
works.
ask his question. Go, Ray.
No, I'm not going to ask a question. I just want to comment on.
Okay.
I based an answer that I typed out there on a 55-gallon breeder tank that I used for putting the juveniles in. Once they were on to mysis only for a few weeks, then I would put about 200 in that 55-gallon tank.
Oh, jeez.
And as my reed-eye adults got bigger, I was getting way bigger batches. So I ended up eventually putting as many as 600 and 700 in that same tank. But the difference being, I was doing maintenance and water change commensurate with what the 200 in there needed.
Yeah.
And then when you get the bigger batches in there, then you have to up that. But also, if you're only starting off with 200 and you're at a certain level of maintenance and water changes, as they grow, you're going to have to up that level, or you're going to have to move some out to other tanks.
Yep.
And the preferred method, in my opinion, is the easiest way, is to up the work level and do more water changes and larger water changes, and be able to keep them in there for a longer period of time. You'll get to a point eventually you just plain have to move them. You can't keep them in that kind of density anymore.
I was going to say good night to Sophie's seahorses. The light just went out. I saw it. So cool that she has them in the background. But no, Ray, I totally agree with you. And I just want to say again, for anybody watching this episode, if you're brand new to seahorses, this episode honestly is not for you. What we're talking about is if you have fry and you're trying to raise the fry and you become successful with the fry, and then you're looking for, oh my God, I'm now successful and I have 30 to 200, as Ray's talking about, 4-inch seahorses that I can't sell all in a day. How do I house them? So it's a very different circumstance. Yes, you can shove a bunch of seahorses in a tank, and especially if you have it completely artificial and depend on maintenance underneath, which we're going to talk to Holly about in a minute. But you can do that as long as you're keeping up on the water changes and going crazy trying to keep it clean. The better way is to separate them, as Ray's saying, and keep them in different tanks as they grow, or, understand what you have to do to keep the tank clean. Again, this is not for newcomers. Somebody just starting out with seahorses should buy adult, adolescent or to adult seahorses and do 2 per gallon or 2 per 30 gallons. Sorry. We're talking about once you get into, you understand seahorses, you know their needs, you've dealt with them for a while, you've had fry, you're raising fry, and then you can get away with a little bit more because you have that experience, right? You know what to look for, you know what it's going to take, you know the water changes and the maintenance that you're going to need to have to do. So I want to make that very clear for like a Zen Ginger. Please don't stuff, 20 seahorses in a 29-gallon, because it will not work out well for you. especially if you set it up as a seahorse tank with like sand and decorate, and live things, gorgonians. No, you just can't do that. It won't work. We're talking about, again, once you have adolescent growing fry that you're sticking into a container just to contain them and keep them healthy until you can sell them. So just wanted to explain the difference. I hope that was helpful. I don't know. I rambled a bit, but Anyways, Ray, did you have more on that? Oh, what are you sharing? All right.
Can you click the share?
Yes.
There's about 50 or 60 in a 25-gallon cube on that tank there.
So, but they don't even look like adolescents to me.
No, they're 5 months old.
Yeah.
And then this is a 55-gallon tank, and at that time there, the ones that size, there was probably a little over 100 of them.
Jeez.
But the thing is, you can push the boundaries if you've got some experience to know the starting point.
Yes.
And once you get so that you're doing fine with the starting point, then you start pushing it by doing the increases in water changes and so on, and the husbandry. The husbandry is really critical, wiping down all the sides and that to get the bacterial slime off it. but also blowing around, making sure there's no detritus line trapped somewhere.
Yep.
That's critical if you're going to overdo a tank.
No, I agree. And I would say too that that's a really great point, Ray, because the thing is, if you're looking at this picture here, and is there more pictures for us to look at or no? You
Oh,
guys,
I didn't scroll any further. I
so I'm
forgot what.
gonna
See,
say,
I don't even remember what's on these things anymore. It's been so long.
looking at those pictures, do you guys see? I'm gonna stop sharing now, but do you guys
Well,
see that there's
that's how I originally started them. I have tons of these 4 liter jars. Well, I had them. Somebody else has them now.
right. But what I was going to say is that's a great point because, again, just going back to anybody new starting out with seahorses, this is not this is not what we're not talking to you because it does take that time and experience. And if you're setting up a seahorse tank, like I think Zen Ginger wants to do, where it's very, animated, meaning sand, meaning gorgonians, meaning all the other stuff, the other things you might put into a seahorse tank that are still safe, but it's a different situation when even like me, I was like, oh my God, I was successful with these fry. They're eating frozen food, and now I have these huge seahorses and there's not enough room. And so I set up another tank. I'm definitely not gonna make it pretty. It's going to be bare bones, nothing.
And that's why I didn't have much in that tank really, because that way I could see everything in it. Like when I'm siphoning, it was easy to find, the uneaten food.
So for the
Easy
tank,
to clean,
yeah.
because I cleaned like often. I'd like Ray was saying, wipe down like all the sides, the bottom of the tank, and
Well,
disinfect everything that
you,
was
yeah.
removable. And
Well,
so
no, that's the point I was kind of going with is that when you're talking about just housing juvenile seahorses that are weaned onto frozen foods, that you're feeding frozen foods, and that becomes another danger, then you want bare bones, and you're doing some really heavy sterilization, wiping the sides, having major filtration, in other places, or being a major filtrator yourself by doing huge water changes because the tank is overstocked, and you're not trying to make it pretty. So I keep saying that because I'm afraid someone new will watch this and be like, oh, I can throw all these seahorses in a tank. You cannot. You cannot. Don't do it. It won't work. This is after you've had years of experience and you're dealing with fry and you're dealing with adolescents. Then you can push the boundaries, as Ray said, if you're willing to scrape every side. Have a tank that just looks like my 90-gallon adolescent tank. My daughter, we did a video once and she was like, this is so boring. And I was like, I'm sorry, but no, they have hitches, bare bottom. I'm scrape. I had it. It was a 90-gallon, so I had to like make a contraption where I had a sponge connected to a scraper where I would get the bottom of because you're trying to get all bacteria out. You're just trying to keep these seahorses alive and healthy and growing so that they can be sold or put in other tanks, So it's a different situation from someone new setting up a seahorse tank that they want to be pretty and, look like natural. Okay, I'm done rambling.
One other point.
And I did add a chiller shortly after also because we have problems with heat here in the summer. So I have chillers on both my tanks now. And that helped because the way I used to keep the temperature down was frozen 2-liter bottles.
Yeah.
And you got to switch them out often. It was very labor intensive and fans. And I was so happy to get the chillers and they're still going. I saw that video was 4 years old. So a lot of things have changed in my system since then. But I got the chillers shortly after that video and they were a godsend.
I still think it was an amazing video for the record. And I have videos out there that are 10 years old, and I'm like, oh, and people are still like, oh, that's so great. Okay. And what was I going to ask you? Damn it. Oh, no, I forgot. Gone. Totally gone. All right, it'll come back to me. All right, let's go to the next question because I just lost my train of thought completely.
Oh, and Bella's Seahorse Beauties, it was asking about the temperature, and I run my tanks roughly 68 to 72 is
That's
the
what
range
actually,
that I try to keep them in.
thank you so much, Bella's Beauties. And you can jump in here anytime, any week. You know that. But I was going to ask you, that's what I was going to ask you is, did you try to keep your adolescent tanks that were overstocked, knowing that the temperature lower? And we just lost Holly. Hang on. She's coming back. Here she is. Are you having Wi-Fi issues, ma'am?
Showing it, but I keep losing connection. I didn't have any until we went live, so I don't know. But everything else is working, so I think it's just the restream.
Sorry. Okay. Well, but so did you keep a lower temperature when you knew your tank was overstocked?
No, I always keep the temperature low. Even
So,
even with the others.
So let me rephrase the question. If you had a tank that was set up to be beautiful and had sand and gorgonians like you first started out with, if you were going for that theme where you wanted a pretty Seahorse tank and you kept it at, let's say, 74 because you were worried about the softies and the gorgonians and the other fish in the tank, so you kept the temperature at that, risky level in order to keep everything you wanted to keep. But then you had fry and juveniles, and then you're setting up a juvenile tank. Would you then keep that tank cooler because you knew you were overstocking it?
No.
I would for sure.
No?
But honestly, knowing what I know now, I keep the adult tanks that low of the
Right.
temperature. Because in the beginning, when I didn't have chillers and I was trying to keep the temperatures down manually, you know how hot it gets here. I was fighting to keep the temperature at 74 or below. It was hard. So a lot of times my tank temperatures were getting above 74. And it was out of my control basically because here I was doing all this stuff to cool it down and it wasn't enough.
Right.
So my fry actually went through, when I was raising the fry, they actually went through times when their water was close to 80 degrees. And they survived, they made it. Sadie grew up in warm water and here she is, 5 years old now, just about. But what it was I was constantly giving them new water. So the bacteria was being controlled more by my water changes and sterilizing everything than by the temperature. And we've talked about it before. It's not the temperature, they can deal with the upper 70s in temperature. It's not bad for them. It's the bacteria growth that we're trying to prevent. So as long as you prevent the bacteria growth, however you prevent it, is what you're shooting for.
Ray, go ahead. I know you want to say some things.
Basically, I don't lower the water changes, mainly because I'm not going to let conditions get to the point where I have to lower the water change. You only have,
Do you mean
you're only going to have to lower it if you're slacking on what you need to do in that tank, and the bacterial load starts to get up and starts infecting something. Then you've got to put them down to 68 in order to slow up that expansion while you get the bacteria under control again. But if you don't slack on things, if you do things proper, there should be no reason to have to lower it below 74. I was below 74 for most of the fry stuff because the basement room that I use for growing all these fry in was cooler in there. There was no heat. There was a register there for the heat, but I kept it shut off. It helped with the growing the copepods and the rotifers and the nano. I found that the cooler water gave me better results with them, and it just so happened that it was a good temperature anyway for the fry and juveniles. But eventually they would get out in the other part of the basement where it would be up around 72. And then
Right. I think there's a delicate balance between raising fry in adolescents in too sterile a condition where they can't go to a home and live, right? Because their immune system is not up to par because they're so used to idyllic situation. But I also think that if you're trying, on the other hand, there's always, this, that, or the other. On the other hand, if you're a hobbyist breeder trying to raise fry and you've gotten them weaned on this frozen food and you've separated them into other tanks and you're still having trouble, I do think that lowering the temperature can help. And until you can get the situation under control with bacterial issues. Do you agree with that?
I had already said that if you're slacking or something, not doing things properly, then eventually the bacteria are going to expand. And then at that point, to give you time to get things under control, then you do have to lower your temperature. The other comment you make about my mind is fuddled here.
I don't remember what I just said
exposure
either.
to things to give them better resistance. I just haven't got the right words.
Their immune system?
For them to get that exposure, I think even for a hobbyist, even at their best, they can't stop that exposure. It's going to be there anyway in small amounts. And that's sufficient basically to do things. Now, if you're in a lab and trying to do everything perfect and had all sorts of equipment, then there might be a different story. But I can't see any normal hobbyist being able to function at that level. Like, it would be an abnormal task trying to raise fry because you'd be doing nothing. In order to keep it to that level, you'd be doing nothing but trying to maintain that water quality.
Yes. No, I agree. I just have always wondered that, and I've talked with Dan about this repeatedly. Like, if they're raising fry in these very, commercial breeders, not hobbyist breeders, but commercial, that's why I think hobbyist breeders are the answer, guys. We need more hobbyist breeders. Sophie, Zen, wink, wink. Anyways, when you have commercial breeders that are raising them in this super sterile environment, and then, they get big enough and they're sold, and then they go to a tank where there's all this other stuff that they haven't been exposed to. I've always just wondered about that. My seahorses from Daniel were always great. So, I've got nothing to say about it. I just have always wondered when we're talking about the bacterial aspect and immunity and their defense systems, whether it's inherent and genetic or whether they're exposed environmentally. Same thing with humans, right? It's a big debate. So there's not going to be an answer tonight, but I'm just telling you guys that I wonder about it too, because it's interesting. All right, I'm going to shut up now. Let's go on to the next question. Miss Sophie, interrupt me anytime to tell me what questions I've missed, because I've got to scroll back up. And I think I lost some of the questions.
Zen,
I asked.
Zen was asking how often do each of you do actual water changes in a stable, lightly stocked tank? And would for once a week freshwater schedule work for them? And then assuming that she doesn't overfeed.
Okay, who said that?
Then
Zen was
Okay.
asking,
Okay.
but I told her you
Sorry.
can't tell
I-
somebody
wait,
just
wait.
what's needed for
Wait,
any
wait,
given
wait.
tank.
Ray, hang on. You're going to have to repeat that because I missed all of it. Sophie, this is why I need to let you run the show so you can put up the comments. But okay, go, Ray.
You can't tell somebody exactly what their tank needs. I had 40-gallon tanks here. I had 440s with the same number of barbs in each tank, and I had to do different amounts of water change. Actually, I did the frequency on them once a week, but I had to do different volumes on them just because of some differences in the tank, and I didn't know what it was, but there were differences there. And if you have different size seahorses than somebody else, if you have some corals in the tank that others don't have, or if you got some crabs or something that others don't have, like there's so many variables in there that, and you may feed different than somebody else. If you're feeding,
So time out. Wait, back up real quick because I want to make sure I ask this question before I forget it. Ray, how do you tell? Because that's the key that any newcomer wants to know. They want the experience of a very experienced seahorse keeper. So you said I had to do different water changes on 2 tanks of the same amount of the same seahorses. How did you know you had to do a different water change?
time and experience. It's not something I knew at the start when I first set them up. And there's nobody that could tell me. And there was no way I could figure something out for myself. It's a case of if you're starting out with a tank, then my general recommendation is if you think you're doing enough, do more.
And I just want to tell all of you watching, literally, you guys know I'm going through an experience in my work, not to go off into left field, but I want to punch these assholes in the face, like Ray, who says, I just can't tell you. It's just experience.
I can tell you what I do.
Well, and I'm going to ask you, Holly, in a second, and then we're going to let Sophie talk sometime in this channel. But there really isn't an answer. He's right. But what I wanted from you, Ray, and what I hope Holly shares is like how you start noticing that something's different, especially if you have 2 tanks side by side and you can see the differences. But even for someone new, just looking at the tank and figuring out maybe I need to do more water changes, maybe my skimmer's not up to par, maybe I need to add a K1 reactor. How do you define or determine that your biological filtration isn't doing its job, that you as the keeper aren't doing your job with water changes, or maybe you need chemical filtration? That's what I'm trying to get to. Go ahead, Holly.
So what I do on my tanks is a third of the water volume once a week
Okay.
on each tank. Now, keep in mind for me, each tank is also getting roughly 5 gallons changed out every day due to siphoning.
Right. Right.
Because I feed them a few times a day and I'm siphoning out each time. So on a day when I feed them 3 times, that's 5 tank I'm changing out through the siphoning. So a third of the tank volume has always worked for me on my tanks. I use that rule with both my tanks and it seems to work, fine based on, my filtration and the daily siphoning and all that. When you're with a new like for instance, when I was doing the juveniles, the way I figured out my water changes was by testing and looking at things and like Ray was saying, just making an assessment, if you need to change water or not based on how the seahorses are doing, if you're seeing signs, that it needs, such as it's getting dirty, stuff like that. But really, for just a normal seahorse tank, in all the years I've been doing this, I've gone by that third of the water volume and been fine with that, other than circumstances where I was raising the juvenile, that type of thing.
So for me, my basic answer, guys, is going to be that when I start noticing nuisance algae creeping up,
Mm-hmm.
if I'm doing my due diligence, even in a tank that's new and I have gorgonians and sand, whatever, when I start seeing the stuff come up on the glass, if I'm doing my weekly water change or bi-weekly water change and, using a magic eraser to do the sides and doing my due diligence and I still see buildup happening, that's when I say I'm not doing enough. Something's not enough.
Mm-hmm.
And I've experienced that in this 40-gallon all-in-one because the skimmer's not enough. I knew that from the start, right? We always recommend going with a skimmer that's 2 times the aquarium volume, and the highest I could find that would fit in this 40-gallon all-in-one was 1.5 times. So I already know it's not doing the job. And I've used K1 media reactors. I've used Robert King char chambers, and they help and they work, but it took more on my part because I didn't have the sump. I didn't have the space to put a huge skimmer and a huge K1 reactor or whatever I wanted to use. Like, there's no, you have to use this filtration, but there is, you need water volume and you need enough filtration or you're going to have to do the work. And this girl's lazy. So when I started realizing that this 40-gallon all-in-one is not going to cut it, even with me doing my major water change once or twice a week, I started separating the seahorses. I've actually done that now because, yeah, you can't, if you see nuisance algae growing, if you see that buildup is happening when everything's the same, then you know that you got to do more. Would you agree with that, Ray?
Well,
You weren't even
basically,
listening to me.
like when I started off, I just started off with the theory that I knew the water had to be clean. I didn't know at that time just how clean. We've learned so much in the years since then. But my theory was that in order to keep the water clean, I had to do a certain amount. So I stopped and I thought about what I figured I needed to do with my very first tank. And then I decided, well, I'm going to do more than what I think I need to do just to be on the safe side. And I actually eventually ran into problems because I didn't know at that time about dissolved organics. And
Right.
and for people that test their waters, you're not going to find that out. You can have all your other tests showing perfect, and your dissolved organics can be bad. But I went on that principle, and then gradually over the years, with on Seahorse.org and with Dan, we came to realize that dissolved organics came into play there, and because we can't measure it, well, we can if we send samples away to a lab, but that's expensive, and by the time you get the results back, it's too late. So in lieu of that, we have to do preventative measures, and maybe you're going to end up doing it more than what you actually have to, but because we don't know exactly for each tank what we have to do, it's better to be on that safe side and be excessive. But then even at that level, you always have to keep an eye out for the things that might be indicating that something is going to go south. And it may even be that you'll see an infection on the seahorse first. But it could be also, like we were talking previously about parasites and talking about the scratching and so on. Well, scratching is a normal thing there. But if it all of a sudden starts to get worse, that's another sign there. And that indicates that you have to upgrade your policies again. and maybe either cut back on the amount of food that they're getting or clean up more of the food that's left over after if you haven't been diligent about putting in the right amount. Cleaning out your filter material a minimum twice a week, because the longer that crap is sitting in there, it's decaying all the time, right from the time it hits the water. And
Yeah.
the longer it decays, the further the degree of breakdown, and therefore it's releasing even more of those dissolved organics. So it's a case of, again, like I say, I don't think there's anything that anybody can really tell you on a specific tank. I can give you generalities on how I approach it and how I think it needs to be done. But beyond that, there's nothing like experience that is going to be
Sure.
the final thing for it.
That's
Now, unfortunately, some
that.
people pick up on the experience side of it faster than others, and some people never pick up on it and always have trouble. And that's unfortunate. And I don't know what to tell them other than just, if you're having that kind of trouble, just upgrade a hell of a lot more than what you're doing, not just a little bit.
Right. And you know, as I've tried to work on this website and stuff and you know, try to put articles together, there is no absolute answer, but there are basics. And I know we've done it before, but we're going to do it again. And I'm going to try to actually find videos and or pictures and such to show you guys how I would actually set up a tank, meaning the questions I had when I set up a tank were, okay, how big a skimmer and why? For how big a tank? How much K1? You know, how much of this? How much does a Robert King char chamber help? And we've talked about this all before, but I think it's important because we've never gone into detail. Like if literally I was setting up a tank, I would go A, B, C, and D. But that's for another day. For this day, the question was, how do you determine how much filtration is needed for an artificial tank? Holly?
I just threw everything I had in it, basically. When you buy your media though, like when you're using the bio balls or whatever, it tells you on the package, it says how many for how much volume of water, that type of thing. But I mean, I know I'm going to be overloading the tank, like, we talked about. So I put them all in there. I figured the more biofiltration I have, the better off I'll be, because I might need to move some too. I might need to move some to another container or do this over here. So there is rules, you can look up and it'll tell you like how many pounds of rock for how many gallons of water. There's stuff that says, off the top of my head, I don't know it, but my line of thinking was do that and more.
No, so actually I absolutely agree with your answer. Right. There's stuff online that'll tell you this amount of rocks per gallon, or the K1 also has this amount of K1 per gallon. Everything has that, but I'm right there with Holly. Throw
the kitchen sink in there too.
So seriously, like if the K1 says, yeah, have this many per gallon, I'm doing double that, right? I couldn't do that in the all-in-one, and that's why I've had so much trouble. Again, if you're able to do a sump, go sump, because you can put a huge skimmer and a huge K1 reactor and, a lot more water volume and filtration and make it work. But if you can't do that, if that's just not an option, then I say throw everything you can. I've got, if I was starting a tank right now, I'd add 2 more Robert King char chambers, just because the more filtration, the better a time you're going to have. If you're going for that idyllic tank, try to make a bigger tank. The bigger you go, the more water volume, the less you're going to have to, worry about these things. But for an artificial tank, I would say I agree with Holly. Throw everything you can into the sump. Ray, any thoughts? No.
I guess I was doing too much typing.
Oh, okay. Sophie, do you have any thoughts?
Well, I can't say I have much with artificial because I don't have an artificial tank. I mean, I do water changes 2 times per week, but then when I notice that there's an algae buildup, I'll do like a really big water change and kind of clean everything. And I do that around like 2 times per month, like extra to the two that I do per week. Um, I I like having my hands in my aquariums. That's why I'm fine with doing that many water changes, but it is a lot of work. So
Yes.
you would definitely want to have a better filtration setup if you don't have the time or you just like don't want to do that much work.
Well, and would you say, and I think you did just say that really the key is you're really brand new to seahorses. You're not brand new to water, but or tanks. But I think you're realizing already that the key is observation
Yeah.
and watching to see how the seahorses are reacting to the situation, to see how the tank's reacting. Do you test?
No, I don't test anymore. I just
Wow.
like I never found it very helpful. A little bit at the start, because I just needed to make sure that everything was stable. But then I honestly realized that looking at the algae was more helpful for me than testing the water.
Mm-hmm.
Well, while I agree with that, I will say to the masses, still test your water. I mean, because it takes a certain,
Well,
I don't know how
especially
to say
when
this.
you're cycling, when it's new cycling, then that's the
Yeah,
time
when
to
it's
Right.
test.
cycling, I
Cycling,
definitely did it a lot.
and but also if there's a problem, or just if you want to be
Mm-hmm.
careful, there's nothing wrong with testing.
Mm-hmm.
Sophie is like to me, she's like this um genius that's going to end up some great person anyways. It takes a certain kind of person to really seriously be able to observe the tank and see things that are happening that normal people would walk past and not see. So I would say, there's nothing wrong with being a normal person and test your tank. But I get what you're saying,
Mm-hmm.
Sophie, completely, because once you get that experience or you just have that knack for it, then you see it. um, and Ray said, what? If you're lazy, it may be better to test.
If you're lazy and if you're not doing things sufficient for the tank so that you're going to see results on the test kit, maybe that'll kick in the butt to do something better.
That's
The
not fair,
problem
though,
is
because
though you can't test for organics, and that is
I,
always the downfall in my experience.
I see,
I
but
think for a lot of people though, I think they're going to get into problems if they're lazy like that. They're going to end up with water quality problems that are going to show on a test kit.
right. And the other thing is that there is the basic biological filtration of the tank that has to happen, and especially if you're going artificial. Like if you have coral and you have sand and you have rock, that's a different situation where it kind of will eventually figure it out itself. Maybe not if you don't have enough, but if you're artificial, you really have to compensate
Mhm,
for it in the
mhm,
sump. And I just think that a lot of people starting out that way won't know the signs that, hey, I'm not doing enough or whatever.
mhm,
So I go back to agreeing with Holly, throw everything, the kitchen sink at it. Put as much as you can that way, or be someone like Sophie that's very observant and doesn't mind having to constantly do water changes if you see a problem. Um,
If she
that's
could do without, she would.
well, that's the
Well, and
basics
water
for tonight
changes
because
are always easier when you have a smaller tank. Like
right,
when I
right,
Just
had
think
all my
public
seahorses in a
aquaria.
29-gallon, the juveniles, before I
right.
did the grow out tank, I was doing a lot of water changes for them, but it wasn't as many buckets of water. you
Right.
know?
Right.
Public aquaria spend money and have a lot of sophisticated equipment. So you can spend a lot of money and uh, put a lot of tech into your tank system so that you don't have to do so much work. But the thing is, how many people have that kind of money?
Right.
Right. And I would just say that, like, Sophie, I'm just telling you this on the side, like I'm doing it publicly, sorry, but just be careful about ever saying, oh no, you know, testing isn't important. Always make sure to back up and say, testing is very important. You should test unless you've just got it like that, because, you know, that person out there that doesn't have it like that needs to test. So I'm just like for running the, or for helping with the channel. Sorry. So guys,
It may be also that I didn't test with the Seahorse tanks because I had so many years of testing
Saltwater.
the saltwater reef tanks
Yeah,
and so on
you were
before that.
experienced.
And then I learned and I stopped testing in those tanks. So I didn't test anymore in the Seahorse tanks.
so I agree. If you are a, I don't even know the word to use, a hyperactive, intense person like I am, testing was sometimes dangerous because if it was off even a little bit, I was freaking out and calling Dan and being like, oh my God, I have 0.22225, you know, and he'd be like, shut up, stop, you know, calm down, you're fine. So I get why testing can be negative once you figure it out. But I will tell you guys, all of you guys, honestly, I tested my tanks religiously for years and years. I don't now, I'll admit it, but that's because I know it does take the years of doing it, and there's nothing wrong with testing to make sure you're okay, because you don't want to harm your seahorses, right? So just saying that again, nothing wrong with testing. Sophie is younger than us, and she does not need to be on this stream until midnight. So we are going to cut this off at 10 p.m. That will be 2 hours, guys. So I love y'all. I want to keep talking all night, but we're calling it in 20 minutes. So if you have a specific question, ask it. I do want to talk about, find out where Sophie's at with her tanks. And I also want to talk about Shiloh's seahorses, if we're able. Can we do Shiloh's first real quick? I'll share that real quick.
Yeah, and real quick though, I wanted to answer Bella's question about the RODI water. I use RODI water.
What was her question? And I'll put it up. Sorry.
She said, "Do any of you use RODI water?" And I said, "I do."
Okay, very quick.
I haven't always. The first 2 years.
Very, very quickly, tell me why you use. Oh God, she's gone again. All right, we're having internet issues apparently. Holly, are you back?
Yep, I'm here again.
Okay, tell me why you use RODI.
Well, mainly because I found out, you know, from fellow seahorse keepers when I was new that it does improve the water quality for them. Now, the water where I live is actually really good quality water. But what I did, I think I got the RODI unit. I was 2 years in at that point. And what I used to do was use tap water and put like a water conditioner in it for fish. And it was Fluval, made by Fluval. I still have that. I use that when I'm doing the freshwater tank water changes. But I got the RODI for the seahorses just to give them better quality water.
Yep. And sorry, I was reading Bonnie's next question, but with RODI, I think it really depends on where you live. Sophie, you said you live near the Great Lakes, right?
Yeah, London.
So have you ever had a water quality test?
No, but I know that it's good.
Yeah, gotcha. So I did in my area, I had a water quality test and it literally had traces of arsenic. What the hell? It had, my TDS is like 495 or something crazy. So I think it really does depend on where you live. For me, anybody asks me, do I need an RODI system? I'm going to say, hell yeah, because I would use my tap water in my tank for anything because it's so bad, right? But Holly's, she found
I
out
may
that
not. I haven't noticed a difference, really. Honestly, I
found
haven't.
out,
And
out that her RODI unit wasn't working, her TDS meter
yeah,
wasn't working, and her tanks were fine because the water is just good there. You know, it just depends on where you are. And I would suggest getting a water quality test. You can get that from your water company. If it's good, it's, you know, I still would say go RODI because that's always the best way. Or buy distilled, or depending on the size of your tank. If it's a small tank, you can just buy distilled. But I
If
would
you live
definitely,
in the city, you can usually call your city waterworks and ask them for a report on it.
yeah. Well, that's what I was saying. I got my water company to send me a report. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Is Holly back? Holly is back. All right. So yeah, I would agree to that. And just, you know, it
usually
depends on
it's
where you
on your
live.
water company's website. That's where I get mine. You can pull up their website and they have a report available. At least here in California, I think they're required to do that. I don't know about other places, but that's
I think it varies city to city because some put up a very rudimentary chart with a few
Mhm.
key figures, and then there's others that put up a mile long with everything that could be in the water, a reading for it.
Yeah, mine's like a mile long. It's like 4 pages or something. I don't know what half of it is, but
Zen said that there's arsenic traces in all water now, but within
Mhm.
acceptable limits. No, screw that. I agree with you. I'm not saying no to you. I'm just
Yeah,
saying
it
no.
shouldn't be. It shouldn't be. Yeah, right.
Ugh. And I don't think there's any in Holly's water or probably Sophie's water near the Great Lakes. I think it's when it's manufactured water. But I think I had one more question from Bonnie before we go to Shyla. Okay, last question for tonight. We're always back next week, guys. But a Seahorse Keeper author said you should siphon prior to feeding to clean out waste, and then about 20 minutes to siphon the leftover uneaten food. I'm not sure what the question is, but I agree with that. You agree with that, Ray?
No.
Okay, why not?
Well, first of all, that's a two-stage, like siphoning out the crap, the waste there before you're feeding, and then siphon it again afterwards. If you're going to siphon it all after. Why do it in
Yeah.
two stages? And then, in my opinion, that's the wrong way to go about it. You only have to siphon the uneaten food until you learn how much food to put in
Mm.
that they can consume in the 12 to 15-minute period. And by adjusting that food that you put in, you should have so little left over that you don't have to bother doing a siphoning after every feed.
Yeah, to be
No,
honest, I don't really siphon out. I feed them very, very slowly, just like one or two shrimp at a time. They eat like the whole thing. There's not much to siphon out.
so see, I did that, Sophie, with my Barbori, but I did it that way because they were picky, right? They would have to eyeball the food and then pick a piece. It's much easier for a newcomer to just throw the food in and watch the seahorses chase it. Did you decide to do it that way just because you want to do it that way?
I mean, yes, and that was kind of just how it was told to me that I should do it. I don't remember if it was Ray or I read it online that you should feed them like that. I was already kind of feeding my goby like that, and I knew from Ray that it wasn't good to have a lot of waste. So then I tried to
Mm-hmm.
make the least amount possible, and I just like didn't like having to siphon it out afterwards. So I just did it like that because it's easier.
I wouldn't say there's anything wrong with that method. I would just say if you're lazy and you don't want to have to sit there feeding one at a time. And also, Ray, haven't you said many times in the past that, or maybe it was Dan, I'm sorry if I'm wrong, but someone said that the problem with target feeding, that's what I call target feeding. I have a video out there that talks about the three methods of feeding, and one's broadcast, one's target. I can't even remember the last one, and I got to let Holly back in here now. But, dish feeding is the third one. But with target feeding, it's for me, it was for pickier seahorses or to avoid uneaten food, which isn't a bad idea. But I remember making the point that when you broadcast feed and they have to chase it, they're getting exercise and they're moving around and Ray, go ahead. You're nodding. Speak.
That's my own personal preference.
Okay.
It's, I believe that any pet you have or anything that's live, the less motion that they go through, it's probably going to shorten their lifespan because they're not getting that exercise to keep their systems totally working, just like people. How many people have you known they'll retire, quit doing things, and become very sedentary? Next thing you know, they kick off. And then,
well, that's awful. Go ahead.
but you'll find people that are much more active
Yeah.
and remain active even after retirement are more likely to be the ones that will live to an older age.
Yep. Well, I would also say that, we've seen Sophie seahorses and they're very active. Like usually we're watching her on the video and they're swimming around in the background, they're courting, they're having fry. I mean, that's activity. So I do think it's personal preference. I personally preferred broadcast feeding and cleaning up afterwards just because I didn't have the time. Right. And Sophie, I don't know how you have the time because you have so many things going on. I don't know how you can feed a piece or two at a time. It's
I don't know how the hell she gets any sleep.
I know, right?
I
wrong.
do it between activities, and my mom feeds them once during the day.
Yes. And I mean, I think that's awesome. And again, guys, that's why it's so hard to put together a website because you're not wrong. If what you're doing is working, then who cares if someone says your seahorses need to broadcast feed for activity? No, if your seahorses are healthy and having fry and the way you're doing it is working, then keep going,
Well, mine are
said,
eating while I'm doing other chores. So like while they're eating their breakfast.
We lost Holly again. All right. So she comes back. Wait, unless she's back right now, because I gotta get to Shyla because we gotta end this soon. I don't want to keep I don't want to keep Sophie so long that she can't come. So her parents
It's
will say
okay.
no
My
more.
parents are fine. I'll do my plan.
All right, go Holly.
Yeah, so
Real quick,
I was
Holly.
just saying that while they're eating, I'm changing their filter socks and washing out the cup to the protein skimmers and making new salt water and getting ready for my day. So I'm a multitasker. So they work on eating while I still have to go back, because a dandy, if he spills his food and he can't get it, I have to suck it up and put it back in his dish, because he's spoiled, but he's old, he gets extra special treatment. So I practically am, target feeding him in a way because that's how he has to eat. I actually posted a picture on my Facebook today of me. I have him in my hand because the seahorses, when I clean the tank, usually they know to move to the other side of the tank, when I'm doing one side. Well, Dandy's gotten so, I don't know, lazy in his old age that he won't go to the other side of the tank on his own. So now I have to carry him there. And he just lets me pick him up and move him to the other side of the tank when I'm cleaning.
Yeah. Well, again, I think sorry, I was looking at the Shyla thing. It's whatever works for your seahorses. Once you get to know them, whatever works for them works. But I would say to you, Sophie, and to anybody out there getting ready to set up for Seahorses, if you don't want to have to do that. So actually, let me back up. I'm just going to say that Cheryl has scolded both me and Holly repeatedly because we don't have tough love. And when we were raising Fry and our seahorses didn't want to move from live food that was awesome to this frozen mysis, and me and Holly were both like, how the heck do we do this? We can't just not feed them. And Cheryl was like, you don't feed them. They'll eat it when they're hungry. And it was very hard for us because, you know, we're mommies and we're, you know, they're our babies and we don't want to, you know, let them go without a meal or whatever. So I would say that again to anybody setting up, if you're willing to target feed repeatedly forever, have at it. That's how I had to do my Borbori, and I was okay with it because they were my special seahorses that I wanted to make sure that they were eating. I wanted to make sure that they were getting enough. I didn't care about anything else but those Borbori, and that was fine. But if you're just setting up a tank and you know you're not going to have the time to do that, maybe don't start with target feeding because then you can't, it's harder to transition them to broadcast feeding. Right? If you start by just saying, here's your food, go get it, then there's cleanup, but they end up chasing it and it's not as much of a task for you. It depends on what you want to do. Nothing's wrong is the last thing I'll say. The topic for Shiloh's Seahorses, Ray, was the tail bubbles. Let's go to that.
Sorry,
Right?
it was what?
Tail bubbles.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so let me see if I can share real quick the video. And there was just a few comments. I know you guys helped her in the chat, but there was just a few things that I wanted to also say about the situation. Let me see if I can find the video. All right, here we go. Maybe, maybe not. All right, hang on, let me share. Whoops. Okay, so not a great video, but let's try to share it. Oh, I can't see with this light. I'm sorry, guys. Holy crap, I cannot see. All right, can you guys see? No, you cannot. Hang on. All right. Nope, that's not it. Hang on. Holy moly. Okay, can you see now?
Yeah, I can see.
Okay. All right. So basically,
I can't, but mine keeps freezing.
okay. So basically, Shyla informed that her seahorse was getting bubbles on the tip of the tail. This was the best video she could get. If you watch for a minute. You see the bubble at the end, right? Oh, I can't even point to it, can I? Right there. There's a bubble on his tail. And let me see if I can find the picture too that's a little better. But he was getting bubbles on his tail, if you can see it. All right. Let me see if I can go back and find a better picture. No, that's not it. All right. I don't know if you guys can see that. I have a better picture of tail bubbles. It's pretty ugly looking. It looks like literally bubbles are forming on the tail. So you saw as I was scrolling through the pictures that I had that in the chat. Oh, let me stop sharing. Sorry. That Ray, you suggested Furon 2 and you suggested some different things. And then you said, well, it's not as bad as I thought. and then what was your recommendation?
Don't remember at the time what I said there, but Furan True is usually what I use.
Mm-hmm.
First thing I do is put them in the hospital tank, because if you put them in a hospital tank and change 50% of the water each day or every other day, then a lot of times you'll see a reversal without having to do the drugs, because we can't get drugs here in Canada.
Right.
So that became my alternative. But in the past, when we could get them, I used the Furan too. The problem that I think she run into, that horse died eventually, didn't it?
Yes.
And she was wondering why. But there was no way, without having a pathologist check it and find out what was the actual cause, there was no other way to know. But what I suspect is the same bacteria that caused the bubbles problem also caused an internal damage, maybe to the kidneys, the liver, whatever inside there, that took longer to come to the final point, but eventually it did. Even though that the bubbles were clearing up, then it was probably, in my experience, internal disease is very hard, if not impossible, to remedy.
So
If they end up with something like that, almost always you're going to lose them.
okay. Nope. I agreed with you up until that comment. If they get internal GBD, which is gas bubble disease, then very difficult to save a seahorse. However, what I was going to say to Shyla, and I hope she watches later and sees this, is that
I don't think it was the internal gas bubble disease.
No, right.
I think it was external, but also some bacteria got to the liver or the kidneys.
Sure. But when you just see bubbles on the tail, my point is that is not an indication of internal bubble disease. That is a different thing. That's external bubble disease. And there's also pouch emphysema, which is something we've dealt with also, that's a pain in the butt. And we don't know why certain seahorses get it. But with external gas bubble disease, which is bubbles on the tail, I have had major success. I've had major success once with treating the seahorse, like Ray described with Furon 2, which we can't get anymore and it sucks and da-da-da. I've also had success. I had one seahorse, a male, that got gas or external GBD, tail bubbles, and I treated him. He got better. I put him back in the tank. He got it again. I treated him. He got better. I put him back in the tank. His tail got so bad that I thought there was no hope for him. And I was like, I don't know what else to do. This must be something internal that's causing it, because my point to Shiloh was no other seahorse in the tank had any problems. None of them. Just this one. It was almost like he carried something himself to the tank that only affected him. I mean, we don't know. We don't know. But
that has no bearing on it.
Let me finish though, Ray. With this particular seahorse, I treated him, put it back, he got it again, treated him, put it back, got it again. I put this seahorse in a hospital tank thinking I'm going to try to make the end of his life comfortable, because he just wouldn't get better. He got better because of water changes. It was crazy. He started eating again. The tail bubbles disappeared. I put him back in the tank. He never got it again.
No.
How do you explain that?
Well, the first thing is the fact that that one got it and the others doesn't mean a great deal. It means that the conditions were bad enough in that tank for this individual with the particular immune capabilities that it has. That's what developed, but the others didn't develop because of having a better immune capability.
Right.
So it's not unusual for that to happen.
It's an indicator to make the tank.
A repetition there would mean that while water quality was sufficient for the others, it was not sufficient for that particular seahorse. So if you had increased husbandry or water changes on the tank at that time, you may not have had to keep putting that seahorse back in.
But I did. I did increase all that. And I'm not trying to argue. I
Yeah.
hear you. I just think that sometimes with particular seahorses, it's something that just comes with the seahorse.
Yeah.
It's
Well, I
just,
found the external gas bubble is one of the easiest ones to fix anyway.
I do agree. I
Yeah.
do. You can fix it, but just like pouch emphysema, it's, if you, as you said, if you don't fix the husbandry of the tank, it's
Yeah.
going to keep, they're
Well,
going
the
to
other
keep,
thing too, I find people, they stress themselves out having a seahorse in the tank for a long time, and they tend to put them back in the tank before they should be. In
mm,
other words, it hasn't completely resolved. They may think it's done well enough, but in my experience, I've had too many that I did that too soon, and it got to the point where I learned. I kept the damn seahorse in there till I knew that it was okay again.
so for the record, what Ray's saying is if you choose to put a seahorse in a hospital tank and you choose to treat them with medication, don't see them get better and then stop the medication. You can't, if you do that, you're creating a much worse situation where the bacteria, bugs, parasites, whatever you're dealing with have now almost died because of the medication you were giving them, but they didn't. And then they become resistant. And then the next time you try to treat, it won't work because these bad things on the seahorse have gotten stronger because you didn't finish the medication. Always make sure if you start a medication, you finish it. If you put them in a hospital tank, make sure you finish whatever treatment you're doing before you throw them back in just because they look better. Did I summarize that good enough?
To Shyla again,
Okay.
I've already mentioned this, but she may not have heard it. The fact that the tail bubbles had healed up were not were not indicating that there were no problems remaining. I believe, in my mind, that at the time that the bacteria caused those tail bubbles, it also caused an internal disease, which you didn't know. And so once you had the bubble situation squared away, you thought it was okay. But internal diseases go on until death happens, and there's very few that you're able to keep alive. Firstly, because by the time you see any sign of it, if you do see a sign, and usually I never did, but by that time it's too late then.
So, but
But
I
two
would back
separate
up.
things happened at the same time.
Yeah, but it seems a seahorse with tail bubbles should not make you afraid that you're gonna lose them.
No,
Could
because it's
absolutely
unusual for that to happen, but it does happen.
right. Well, I just want to make sure anybody watching
Yeah.
later knows that, one of the main things I do want to get across, and then we're going to Sophie because Sophie has been here all night and not talked. But I just want to get across that when you have a problem with one seahorse in a tank, number one, it isn't. I disagree with people that say, oh, that's it. You have to hospitalize the whole tank. I don't agree because there's many, many, many times where that particular seahorse, yes, Ray, I agree with you, is an indicator that there may be a problem with the tank and you need to fix that. But it also could be that that seahorse just carried something. I've had a tank full of seahorses where nothing else was wrong, and this one seahorse just kept having problems over and over and over again, different problems, tail bubbles, pouch emphysema, whatever. It was something to do with he had internal GBD, and I was seeing the signs, and no other seahorses had a problem because it wasn't actually about the tank, it was about that seahorse. So all I want to say is if you have a seahorse with a problem, come here, we'll help you. Shyla, I know you're not freaking out, but anybody else, don't freak out if one seahorse has something bad going on, because that doesn't mean there's an end to everything. Holly said, Dandy has outlived everyone. You know, ha ha ha, because he was the one that everybody said he'd never live. So just go ahead, Ray, real quick, and then we're going to Sophie.
I doubt very much that the numbers of situations like that where the two things happen together, like 1 in 100 would be a stretch. I would
What?
say it's less than that.
What do you
Where
mean?
a seahorse gets two things like the outer tail bubbles and then an internal problem that you can't see and don't know about.
Right.
It doesn't happen very often.
And I agree with that. And I also agree that if any of your seahorses get tail bubble or, you know, whatever, that you need to look at the tank and try to up the maintenance just to make sure it's not something wrong with the tank. I'm just also saying don't kill yourself and feel bad and feel guilty like you screwed everything up because number one, you're new and you're learning and you're doing the best you can. And number two, sometimes it is just the seahorse. I mean, how do you explain that one seahorse keeps getting sick and the rest are fine? I don't have an answer. All right, on to better topics. Sophie, what's going on with your tanks?
So I just got my third batch this morning after my second batch completely died, all of them. I was sad, but I did get my third batch this morning. I got around 60. We don't, like, I don't know the exact numbers because it was really chaotic this morning. And it was like they had already hitched everywhere. And so it was a really slow process. Like throughout the day, we kept picking out more. So I have them there, and we're just hoping that they'll do better this time.
So wait, couple questions real quick. So you said he gave birth all day?
No, he gave birth in the morning, but by the time, because he gave birth like a few hours before I woke up, by the time I woke up, they had all scattered and gone everywhere in the tank for the
Oh,
feeding.
gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
So you're hunting them. Okay, gotcha. All right. And what are your, I mean, like, what are your thoughts just at being new to doing this? And I always tell people, do not ever feel bad if your first or first few batches don't work out because it's not easy. And you know, you're doing better than the parents in the wild because they only keep like a couple alive, period. So, what do you think is going on? Like, why do you think the first two batches didn't work out?
I think the first batch, the seahorses just weren't viable. Like I had very little, and none of them seemed very like alive. Um,
They were little sticks, right?
yeah,
And they weren't doing.
weren't doing well. They didn't hitch at all. The second batch, I had higher hopes for. I honestly don't know why that one, like none of them survived. I'm hoping that it's just again one of their first batches. I'll start to worry if like this batch doesn't have any survivors at all, because then I'll start to kind of question why they're not. For now, I'm just kind of blaming it on the fact that they're new batches, and we hope that that's just the problem.
See, and that's what's amazing, guys, is Sophie is obviously a scientist. I mean, she's got this scientific way of doing things. But so with the second batch, and I'm not quizzing you. I'm just, I'm literally curious. Like, was there any indication? Like, how long did they live? And then the day before you lost them all, was it like this dramatic, they were just all gone in the morning? Like what
No,
happened?
that was okay. So that's kind of what happened with the first batch. Around a week, I noticed that I only had like four left out of the 18 that I had. And that was kind of a
Mhm.
wake up call at the one week and like a few days kind of mark that's kind of when they die. That
Gotcha.
The second batch was slower. I noticed a few. I changed the water after that. and they seem to be doing a lot better. Like they seem to be doing like fine. And then in the next 2 days, so it was more gradual for that one. I had like 10 from each jar that died. So I was left with like one jar. I put them all in that one jar, and yeah, and then they just slowly died off. But it wasn't as sudden as the first one.
So are you doing with the jars? That's Ray's thing. I've never done jars, so I honestly don't know. But are you like switching them between jars every day, or how do the jars work?
No, so I have like 25, 25. I think I have a few more than 25 in each jar right now. Um,
Okay.
and then well, I try to do it every day, but on busy days I can't. So it's like every 2 days, I'll switch the water. They stay together in a section. So like these 25 will stay all together for the next one. And I just like
Yeah.
change the jars and put new water in, like fully new water. And then only when they started dying, because I didn't need 3 jars for like 5 seahorses, I just moved them all into one.
Right. No, I don't think anything's wrong with that. I'm just trying to feel it out because the jar thing's Ray. Ray, what are your thoughts?
Do you wipe down the jars for slime every day? I mean it. Well, you're only doing it every other day, which is what I did. I did 100% every other day, but then I would totally clean the jar, wiping down the slime and making sure it was all clean.
Yeah, that's what I
That
do.
that
I
slime
also put
there, you
rubbing
don't see it.
alcohol in the inside. So it's like completely dry. I put rubbing alcohol, so it's like completely disinfected, and then I put them back in.
Well, I never went to that extent.
She's going above and above. Yeah. Anyways,
But
so
anyway, it is the two critical things. There's more than that, but the critical thing is wiping down the sides every other day, changing that water every other day, and making sure that there's sufficient water flow to keep them in motion so that they can't stop at the top. Those are the first three things I always took care of.
Yeah.
so do you go ahead?
Right now it was only the first batch that ever stayed at the surface. Now they're like in constant motion. Like it's not crazy motion, but they're always circling if they're not hitched on. And they hitch like really fast. They don't.
Um,
So even after they were born, they started hitching in my main tank.
Yeah.
So that's a good sign, A. And B, it's really hard to see on this video. I can't even see the fry.
I can
I just
bring
see
it
jar.
closer if you want.
Well, I don't want to, I mean,
I don't know if you,
oh, don't take their bubbles
I don't know if
away.
you can see them. Wait. No.
I still can't. Is it me?
No. Oh, there's a few.
Are they all hitched?
Yeah, there's a few plugged.
Oh, no, I see them now. Now I see them. All right,
Yeah,
there they go.
yeah.
Oh, God, I miss that so much. I'm so jealous. Ah, jeez, I'm so jealous.
And they like the gutter guard, eh?
Pardon?
They like the gutter guard.
Yes, the gutter guard is actually really helpful. Thank you.
Yes. Holly, what was your question?
Oh, I was asking if you tried cleaning their brine shrimp with the peroxide trick.
And I want to
Yeah.
say before you answer that I know it's an extra step and it's a pain in the butt. And you're like, oh my gosh, more. But the thing is, both Holly and I, for both Holly and I, it was a game changer. It went from
It changed
I
everything. They
can't
stopped dying
alive,
completely the
and
day I
all of a
started
sudden,
doing that.
yeah, all of a sudden they're all alive and they're all, and now I can't find enough room for them. And it was all about the food. Holly, go ahead, because I'll be right back.
Yeah, I would say I started using the peroxide and I used the formalin trick, and the losses just stopped like immediately. with that batch. Like I'd been losing ones from that batch, fairly consistently. And then as soon as I started cleaning up their food, I didn't lose any more for like another few weeks. I mean, it made a huge difference for me.
Well, and I would say like I mean, I never had real trouble with the seahorses until I started weaning, except for getting over that hump that was sterilizing the food or peroxiding the food. And I don't even think I did use the formalin for years. Like I did eventually, but I still had success just when I cleaned up the food.
I started with the formalin soon after. I want to say within a couple weeks or so, because I saw the scratching.
Mhm.
Where they take their tail like a dog.
But I don't think Sophie's seeing that, are you?
No, I saw it a little bit in my first batch, but I have not seen it since. Like I don't really see the scratching very much.
So I'm a firm believer if you don't see it, don't treat it, because you don't want to throw medications at something that you don't know, if there's a problem. I would agree with Holly that, most commercial breeders use the formalin treatment as a preventative. So it's not something you should avoid. I'm just saying it's not something you should run out and do. But I would say that her point about peroxiding the Artemia is huge. It was a game changer for me. And Holly, what does that mean? What are we talking about?
Well, basically, it cleans the bacteria from them, I think, is what it's doing. And it's probably different for everybody. Like Ray says, some people can go without it, some people don't need it, but maybe there's something about your conditions that requires it. So it's an easy step. You might just try it and see if it makes a difference. It's kind of like Ray was talking about earlier. If you can't keep doing the thing and expecting things to change.
Right.
Wait, okay, is there somewhere
So when if you change something, it might work.
What'd you say?
is there
You know,
somewhere I can find the steps on how to do this? Because this is my main problem. I just don't fully know how to do it. So I haven't had time to like search it up and actually do it. So
Okay, I am giving you my absolute word. I have Dan Underwood's step-by-step instructions. I will not only give it to you, I will put it up on the Not Finished website literally tomorrow. It's my day off. I will give it to you. I will put it up. And if I don't have it up by 2 p.m., I want you to message me and be like, Kelly, where's my. Because seriously, I've forever. It's ridiculous that it's not up. I will put it up.
okay.
And I will give it to you because I can't read it off the top of my brain, but I know I can access it and put it up for you and for everyone else because it's such an important step. And it's just like 5 minutes and it just changes everything,
Yeah.
No, it totally changed for me. I noticed because I'd been losing them steadily. And then all of a sudden, when I did that, completely stopped losing them, like all of a sudden.
And I know Ray disagrees
So
with
it has
us.
nothing to do with the loss.
Sorry.
Ray, you disagree with us, right?
Well, I'm not saying that it doesn't do something, but I'm saying it might have been coincidental that when you started using it, maybe they were just better produced at that time. So all of a sudden they were becoming fit and living. But it may not have been the peroxide. It may have been just that they were better fry being produced at that time.
Well, it is a very interesting topic that we will talk about on another date because we're keeping Sophie way too late. But I was going to say it's a very interesting topic. Like I know a lot of people use feeds that, I remember Tom Hornsby talking about having a bucket he left in the yard, and that was the feed he would use for fries, and it had all the crap in it, but the feed was just so.
I've done that. I did that for mine.
And I get that sometimes it just works, but
Copepod.
if you're trying to do things right, you know, using the peroxide step, or if you're having trouble. So if your fry are not living, like Sophie's having trouble, then that's an extra step you can add in just to see if it does make a difference. Ray's completely correct. Maybe it's just that they haven't gotten up to par the parents, meaning in creating the fry. But I just know that I had viable fry from the start. My seahorses were already adults; they weren't adolescents, and they had already had batches before they came to me, so it wasn't their first batch, and I was still losing them. And then when I added the peroxide, because you got to think, you guys, when we're hatching brine shrimp in our houses, at least me, it wasn't a very sterile situation, right? I've got a light bulb over it. There's dust. It's in a 2-liter bottle. I don't have some elaborate setup. I didn't even buy the stuff Holly bought, you know, like the containers. No, I had a 2-liter bottle that I'm hatching brine shrimp in. And you got to think, after you do that so many times, you know, every crease, everything is getting built up. I don't know. Just the peroxide made a game changer for me. And Ray, I hear you. You've been doing it both ways. Yeah, but I would just be interested for Sophie, as you work with this batch, do your thing, do what you do. If it doesn't work out, maybe with the next batch, since you're so lucky and I'm so jealous that your seahorses are giving you fry, maybe let's add that step in. I will make sure you have it and the rest of you have it tomorrow. And then let's see if that makes a huge difference. And that will, then we can all argue with Ray and tell Ray he's wrong. Yay!
How are you gonna tell me that her seahorses finally didn't start producing viable fry?
Because it's 3-1, Ray. 3 women, 1 man, we win. That's it. End of story.
If it was 3 men and 1 woman, you'd say that's a winner for the women.
I would still win. Absolutely right. But in this case, I just think that, yeah, she could keep going and she could have viable fry. Yeah, that's true. But the fry I just saw in that jar looked like the fry I remember. Maybe mine were a little bigger. You could be right. It could be the parents getting together. I've always said that. Don't feel bad if your first few batches don't work out. But if she adds the peroxide treatment to her feeding regimen and it works out and she all of a sudden is the next big breeder, who cares if that was the reason or not, right?
It's like you might as well try it.
Like, if you want them to live, try it.
Can't
If
hurt.
it works, you can't technically say that's why, but if it did, who cares? You're swimming in adolescence.
I could potentially feed one jar with the peroxide ones and feed the other one without.
There you go.
That's what I was going to say. Do both and see if it makes a
we've
difference.
got a test going on. I always
That's a lot more work.
Scientific experiment.
What'd you say, Ray?
A lot more work.
It is, but yeah, it's a
lot
good
of that kind of
scientific
testing for various things over the years.
But why would that be more work to literally take your
Well,
hatching
because
time?
you
Wait,
got
your
to
hatching
sterilize
time.
some and not others.
So that takes 2 minutes.
Well, it takes more than 2 minutes for me
to
to sterilize.
separate them out. Yeah, you got to have different containers and stuff, but that's okay. If
She
you
is
have
a scientist. She is going to pull this off and prove me right and Ray wrong. Oh, the day.
Well, we'll see. I'll try that, and we'll see.
Hey, I can't count the number of hours I've spent testing things out.
Sure.
Just like that test I was trying to do with the drops and then the the little battery operated testers.
Yeah.
You know what they call them now?
No, you've done so much for this community, Ray. We can never repay you. That's why you have a plaque.
There's so many things though I never was successful at.
Who can win everything?
Well, we can all say that.
But you guys, I know I could sit here and talk to you guys all night for sure. I know
We
all
got to get Sophie off to bed. She's only
Yes, that's
14 for
it.
God's sakes.
Well, no, forget about Sophie. We gotta
Yeah.
get me off to bed. I'm tired.
Well, who's
Jeez.
worried about you?
Just saying. The young pup could probably last all night. This girl can't. But we don't want to abuse the time that she spends with us. So we are going to call it for tonight. I appreciate everyone that came. And I appreciate all the questions. This has been really fun one Wednesday. Again, I'm going to get with Sophie once I get on weekends. And we're going to really try to move this channel in a bigger direction and get some more focused energy into it, young energy into it. But it's still on me, not on her, just on me. But anyways, we're going to work on it, guys. And we appreciate everybody that came. And we will be back next week. So, Shyla, keep me updated what's going on with you. And I did remember, because Shyla never got her shirt. Sophie, that's the other thing. I got to send you a member shirt.
Oh yeah, I
You have
was
to have
thinking like I need to become a member because I feel like that's long
You
overdue.
allowed. So anyone that wants one of these shirts, you become a YouTube member. Sophie is going to literally be helping me run the channel, so she gets a shirt. But anybody else who wants one, you got to go and become a member. She is already a
Okay,
member.
I'm not a member either.
Ray, I tried to send you a shirt. You said you never wear it.
That's
So I
right.
said, never mind. All right. But for tonight, oh God, we lost Holly again. For tonight, guys, I am going to cut it. Sophie, I'm sorry that I took control and rambled all night again. We will have episodes where Sophie shares more and, asks more questions and I can zip it. We're coming to that, so stay tuned. But for tonight, you guys, let's all say Happy Wine Wednesday, and we'll see you next week. Happy Wine Wednesday. Cheers. Ray, cheers. Damn it.